Welcome to Benson on Injury Law.
Welcome back to Benson on Injury Law with Paul Benson. Paul is a personal injury attorney based in Wisconsin, and he's spent the last decade helping injured people get clear answers, deal with insurance companies, and understand their rights. I'm Lisa Mosbey, your host. One thing Paul sees often is people waiting longer than they should to reach out for help, sometimes without realizing the impact it can have on their case. Today, we're talking about why those delays happen and what they can mean for your claim. Thanks for joining me again today, Paul.
Hey, thanks, Lisa.
Hey, Paul, when you talk to people who waited a while before calling, what are some of the most common reasons they give?
The number one reason is people say, I'm not a lawsuit type person. So they choose maybe not to call a lawyer or try to assert their rights because they have this negative stigma that I could get into, but they have this negative stigma about making a claim, in an injury setting. That's the number one by far. The other one is if maybe, like, let's say like a dog bite or something like that, maybe it's a family member or a neighbor who's responsible, and they're worried about that uncomfortable situation of making a claim.
A lot of folks hope things will just get better on their own. How can waiting like that affect a Wisconsin injury claim?
Waiting can damage you in a lot of ways. First, evidence can disappear. So people, car accident, dog bite, a fall, any kind of an assault, any kind of injury like that. There's cameras everywhere, and there's a good chance that your injury was caught on camera. However, many, like, let's say cameras in businesses and things like that, normally only store that footage for like 30 days on the long end. So if you wait and you don't go get that evidence is probably gone forever. And in my case, the plaintiff, the injured person, you've got the burden of proof. You got to prove your claims with admissible evidence. If that evidence is gone, it's kind of too bad. Then you may not be able to prove your case. And now it's your word against someone else's word, and who knows how that's going to shake out. So that's the first reason. The second reason is the insurance company might do things that prejudice you, that hurt your position. I'm thinking of an example where, let's say there's like a 3 or 4 car accident or multiple injured people in the same car. If you delay, the insurance company might use up all of their available money settling cases with other people, and there might be nothing left for you. So that's a really, really important one, that if you don't make your claim, if you sit on the sidelines and you don't get involved, you might just get left out, and you might not have any money because the insurance company might, again, exhaust the available money, the limits of the policy, paying off other claimants. That won't happen right away, but it does happen. I've seen it happen where people don't get involved. Another reason to not delay is the medical bills. Medical providers these days would like to get paid out of auto insurance money. The auto insurance companies, though, don't want to pay unless they have some kind of agreement in place with the injured person. So what I've seen happen is hospital will submit that bill to the auto insurance carrier. Auto insurance carrier will deny. Injured person has no idea this is happening in the background. Bills keep coming to them, but they say, I have health insurance. I don't know what's going on. Maybe the health plan will deny because they wanted to go to auto insurance first. And in the meantime, no one is looking out for the injured person because the hospital is trying to they can get a higher rate from the auto insurance company. So that's what they're trying to do. And one or two things can happen. That bill could get denied, and maybe if it goes past 6 months or a year, now your health insurance won't pay it for lack of timely filing. Or number two, the auto insurance will pay that bill, but all of that money will go to them when some of that money could have went to you. It's kind of a zero-sum game. Often there's only so much auto insurance money available. Every dollar the hospital gets is a dollar you don't get. And what a lot of people don't realize is a lot of my job is actually negotiating with the hospitals and with the health insurance plans to try to get the most money I can for my client. So those are the areas that I see real harm happen to people who mean well, but just don't move quickly enough.
So if it's the waiting that's bothering us, that's one thing. But what about feeling guilty about the idea of involving a lawyer, especially if they know the defendant or the other driver in an auto accident or the other property owner, say it's a neighbor? How do you help them understand what's really happening in these cases?
I think the first thing you have to understand is the insurance companies know the law. They have an army of lawyers at the ready on their side, and it is not a fair fight. So even in that situation where it's your neighbor, it's not truly your neighbor. It's your neighbor's insurance company. It's American Family or it's State Farm or whoever is the other insurance company. That is who you're dealing with. And they are a sophisticated corporation hell bent on paying you the least they can, because that's their duty to their shareholders, is to minimize how much they pay on claims so they maximize profits. I mean, that's just the system that we have. So the only way to really even that playing field is to hire a lawyer, is to call someone like me so we can get involved early on and get the claim going on the right foot.
And then what happens with medical treatments and documentation when someone delays getting legal help?
You just inject uncertainty and doubt, and that's the insurance company's friend.
Mm.
So let's say you get hurt, it's pretty bad, but you think, well, maybe it'll get better. So you don't go get looked at. Maybe you wait several months and then you go to the hospital. Well, what the insurance company is going to argue every single time is, how do we explain that gap in that treatment? And how do we not know that something else didn't injure you in the interim? So I always say, don't go to the hospital just to make an injury claim. But if you're going to go as soon as possible to the date of your accident or your fall or whatever it was, because then we're going to have a better chance of proving that nexus, that connection between the injury and the medical treatment. And you're not going to give the insurance company that gap to argue about and say, well, we don't know what happened. For all we know, they got hurt at the gym or they got hurt at work, and they're going to try to blame it on something else.
Insurance adjusters often contact people right away. How does waiting to call a lawyer change the way those early conversations play out?
Well, their goal is they'll say at the beginning everything is recorded, and they always say for quality purposes. They're not recorded for quality purposes. They're recorded so that they have an on the record statement that they can cross examine you on later, and they're pretty deft at taking those statements. They'll ask you things like, but you're doing okay now, things that seem innocuous. And their goal is to get you to basically say that you're okay, that you're not that injured, to um, to minimize your own injuries, which people do in polite conversation. You say, oh, well, I'm okay, and you often understate things in just a normal conversation, not realizing a year later when you're in litigation and you've been going to physical therapy for 6 months, they're going to say, well, way back on May 28th, on a recorded line, you told me you were okay, that it wasn't that bad. So why did you need 6 more months of physical therapy? And people had no idea that that's what they were doing at the time. The other thing is sometimes people will just, again, Midwest nice, will try to just take some fault and be like, well, I could have stopped too, or they'll say something like that, trying to be kind, trying to be courteous, saying there's something maybe they could have done better to avoid a car accident or something like that. Um, Same thing. They're going to use That's going to haunt your case. They're going to use it against you the whole time, and I can't put that genie back in the bottle.
Paul, it is so hard to keep your mouth shut in these situations because you want to explain it all the time. And yeah, I don't know how you work with that day in and day out. And evidence can change quickly after an accident. What are some examples of things that are harder to gather or prove when someone waits too long?
The video footage is the biggest one. Video footage
Yeah.
disappears. Memories fade. Memories are, uh, infamously inaccurate, but the longer they get, the worse and worse that gets. Um,
Mhm.
Vehicles, if the airbag is deployed, there's like a black box that records data from the previous certain number of seconds before the accident. Same thing. Once that vehicle has been taken and junked, that data is going to be likely gone forever. So there's all these things that we can do to go back and prove what really happened, but they are fleeting. Um, Tire marks, that's another thing. The engineers who I use to reconstruct accidents, they do amazing things with skid marks, but those also fade over time. So those are the things that we need to know right away so we can go document that, again, that surveillance footage, those skid marks, the data recorded by the vehicle, witness statements, all of those things, they disappear fast. People change their phone numbers, all kinds of things. People move and they take their Ring camera with them. Things just happens and then that evidence is gone. And then you're, again, as the plaintiff, that only hurts you.
Do you recommend that people actually write down in detail the incident that after it happened or make some notes about it because of those cases, where your memory fades or you won't remember it? How do you help folks to recall it in case they do have to go to trial later?
The first thing I recommend is pull out your phone. Everyone has a smartphone these days, and start taking photos and video wherever you are, no matter what it was. Start doing that because that's going to be there forever. You can interview people with your phone, things like that. And then I say, call me right away. Even I might tell you, hey, this case doesn't make sense or whatever, but it's always free to give me a call and I can tell you, here's what we need to do and give you advice. Even if you decide not to hire me, I'm still going to tell you, here's the steps you need to take to preserve that evidence right away.
Have you handled cases where the delay created challenges, but you were still able to help the person move forward?
Yeah, absolutely. It happens all the time. So, you make do with what you have. If the video's gone, well, then you still have to interview all the witnesses, right? In that car accident thing that we are talking about, let's say the skid marks are no longer on the road. Sometimes you can go back and look and get a Google image, on Google Earth and see, oh, from this day they were there. So there are sometimes more than one way to go get that evidence, but you need someone who knows what they're doing and is practiced in getting those things because there's often more than one way. But you have to know what you're doing.
And you had mentioned earlier that the money may run out. When we wait, other people may have negotiated a settlement. And I know that you're not an insurance agent, but this question keeps popping in my head as you're speaking, and that is, how do we know how much insurance to have these days, especially with an auto insurance case? I know it's not the minimum. I know that much. But do you have any thoughts or guidelines on that for folks?
Yeah, I mean, I think the coverage you need to specifically buy is that uninsured and underinsured motorist coverage. Now you can't have more uninsured motorist coverage than your own liability. What uninsured coverage is, Lisa, is that covers in case uninsured or underinsured, in case the person who injures you in a car accident either doesn't have insurance or has,
Right.
let's say, that state minimum, which in Wisconsin is $25,000, or in property damage, $10,000. I mean, as you know, cars often cost a lot more than $10,000 for repair now. You can rack up $25,000 in a couple hours in the emergency department. So I always tell people buy at least $100,000 of uninsured, underinsured. If you can afford the next level up is normally the 250, 500. That would probably cover 95% of claims. And then you need to have a conversation with your insurance agent about how many, what do you have in assets and what do you need to protect as far as, do you have kids? Does your spouse work? Things like that to protect yourself. But always buy as much insurance as you can afford because these things really do happen. I recently had a client who had a pretty bad brain injury. The person who hit him only had $100,000 in coverage. Thankfully, this woman had $1 million underinsured motorist policy. It took a couple of years of litigation, but they did pay that full policy. So thank goodness she had that. That was there. She ended up having to retire from her job. She worked in a payroll department. She ended up having to retire because of the brain injury. So retire a couple years early. This helped her bridge that gap. So thank God she had that.
Thank you for that. For people who worry that calling a lawyer means they're making it a big deal, what would you want them to understand about this process?
I'd want them to know that the insurance company thinks it's a big deal and they're going to do everything they can to pay you the least that they can. Um, and they do have lawyers on their side and they're investigating this claim, whether you're involved or not. And they are doing everything they need to do on their side of the case. So it's up to you Would you rather have, American Family shareholders or Geico shareholders get that money, or you? It's really that kind of simple of a question. I don't think people should look at it as big deal, small deal. It's really just, what would you rather have? Would you rather have Geico shareholders get that money, or you? And that's how I tell people to frame the question.
What's the most useful thing someone should know early about how these cases work in Wisconsin?
I think the first thing is that burden of proof is on you. If you're injured, it's not fair because you were the victim. Now you have to prove your case, but that evidence disappears quickly. So call a lawyer quickly. The other thing is that decisions get made that can't be undone. Like, for example, how medical bills are paid, things like that. Or were they submitted to health insurance on time? And then again, going back to those conversations with the insurance company, if you don't call a lawyer, they're going to call you, and they're very good at getting you to say things on a recorded line. So I guess the one thing that connects all of that would be call me or call your lawyer right away, so that we can get involved, start preserving that evidence, stand up for you in between you and in the insurance company, make sure your medical bills are getting paid properly, and we can just get a much better result if we get involved early.
Paul, thank you so much for your candor in this conversation. It's been great.
Thanks, Lisa.
Folks, thank you for listening to Benson on Injury Law. If you've been injured in Wisconsin and aren't sure whether it's the right time to talk to a lawyer, you can get clear information without any pressure at paulbensonlawfirm.com. And if today's episode has been helpful, please subscribe and leave a review. We'll see you next time.
Thanks for watching. Be sure to hit that like and subscribe button and leave us a review in the comments.